My name is Fico Vidale, better known as Fico Vidale. I was born here in Zambia in 1967 to a hunting family. My father was firstly a crocodile hunter, and then in the 70s or 1970 he became a professional hunter. So I spent a lot of my childhood in the bush, and hence my passion for being in the bush and for the hunting. I've hunted a lot in Tanzania, Mozambique. I've been to Botswana and to Zimbabwe hunting also with clients of mine. But at the end of the day, Zambia is my home, so I've settled here now, and I'm hunting the Lunga-Busanga concession in Northwestern Province of Zambia. So it's just bordering, and it's a buffer zone to the Kafue National Park. And we've got like 1,800 square kilometers of hunting area. Our hunting system here in Zambia, all the hunting companies get a lease from the government on a game management area, which is abbreviated as a GMA. So these game management areas actually come under different chiefdoms. We still have a tribal system here in Zambia where the chief is the head of the area. Now, in the 60s, these areas were given by an agreement that the chief signed to the game department to manage. So they still belong to the chiefs, but the game department managed the hunting that is done in these hunting areas. There's a lot of hunting areas all around Kafue National Park, and it just makes it a bit more difficult for poachers to access the park because they've got to get past our control first. But they still do. They find methods. There's a lot of traditional fishing within the national park that comes from before the national park was established. The villagers had fishing weirs that they put over streams and floodplains on the Busanga Plains, which is a plain that dries out during the year, but once the rains start, it floods, and it's a breeding ground for the fish. When the floodplains and the rains stop and the floodplains start to recede, then all that fish starts moving back into the rivers where it came from, and even the new fish start moving back. And this is where these traditional fishermen put their fishing weirs and they put their traps there. Now, African Parks has tried to control this a little bit. They have actually given each fish weir a register, and each fisherman has a numbered shirt so that even when they're flying over doing their patrols, they can identify these fishermen. But as always, people will find a way to get around these methods. So, you know, it's a good thing, but in a way it's a bad thing because they think they have a license with that T-shirt and the number on it just to wander all over the place, and they use it as cover for their poaching activities as well. With all our anti-poaching here, it's mainly done during the hunting season, during the dry season here in Lunga, because of accessibility. We do a limited amount of anti-poaching during the rains, but the rains is very difficult to get around. The other day, actually with a client, while we were hunting buffalo, we were stalking the buffalo, and we came across a poacher who was actually between us and the buffalo. And eventually, with a bit of patience, we caught this poacher.
Get back down. Oh, down. Down. I wonder what this rod's for. So yesterday we apprehended a poacher. He had this old rifle on him. It's got like a Mauser type action. Very old. It's got a very straight bolt. Signifies like an army gun. The bolt is not bent in any way. It's just a straight out. And as you can see, it's been very well used. The bullet that he had inside was actually a 30-06 bullet. Well, the case was a 30-06. The head, it actually looks much smaller. We compared it with an AK, which is 7.62, and the head on this was much smaller. Yeah, it's been well used, must have killed lots of animals in the past, and hopefully we've taken it out of circulation. The stock looks like it's a replaced stock. Someone in the village made a stock for it. There you have it.
To make sure that he got properly prosecuted, because he had a rifle with him, we called in African parks, who are the people that manage the Kafue National Park now. So they've actually trained some of their own people in prosecution and gathering intelligence. That poacher will be prosecuted because of carrying an unlicensed firearm. And they collected quite a bit of intelligence, I understand, from this poacher, as he told them, you know, what the routes were, and he told them some other information on other poaching activities in the area. So that helps quite a lot, you know, with catching other poachers. With these poachers shooting these crude firearms, they wound a lot of animals more than they kill. So there's a danger there of also, within the hunting areas, dangerous game like buffalo, which they do hunt, get away wounded. And it's a hazard to fishermen, to the villagers, to the poachers themselves, and to us hunting in the areas. You know, you walk into a wounded buffalo, it can actually kill you, you know.
This is a muzzle loader that they brought in yesterday, homemade, okay? So this would be used to shoot something like the buffalo that we found the remains the other day.
Basically, they take a steering rod or a galvanized water pipe, and they actually thin it down. They bend it into like a cone shape, so that it'll have a little hole in the back here.
So what they would do is they've made some homemade powder. This is charcoal here, okay, and this is saltpeter that they mix together to make the gunpowder. So they would load that gunpowder into this muzzle loader here.
They'll load it from the top. What they'll do is they'll put their homemade gunpowder, they'll put a wad, which is a piece of cloth, they'll put down there. Then they'll put a few lead balls in there, and on top of the lead balls they'll put another piece of cloth so that they don't fall out. They'll put the wads in. This is a ramrod, so they'll put that stuff in there, and then they'll put this down there, and they'll beat it in there to make it all nice and firm and compress it. It's important that it's compacted so that the powder will ignite properly and make an explosion. Because if it burns too slowly, then there will be no explosion, which will fire the lead balls out of there.
Now to load it, I've just cocked it. They would take one of these caps here from a cap gun, and they would, apart from the sulfur in there, they would use the match heads also in there, and then they would stick it here in the breech. So once they put that there, there's the powder and the wads and the steel shot inside there.
You can see that piece of nail moving up and down. That will cause that bolt to come off that little pin and hit the back of the barrel.
And to make that capsule ignite, they just pull the trigger like this, and that impact will ignite the powder, the black powder inside the gun.
and set off the charge, which would, set off the pellets into the animal that they're hunting. This is just a local piece of wood that they fashioned into a stock, made by one of the gunsmiths in the villages here. No sights, so they've got to get in very, very close, and they just point that barrel at the animal. So yeah, very rudimentary, but it works, and they kill a lot of animals with it. So we've got 2 muzzle loaders here that have been collected by our people, and like I said, the saltpeter with this charcoal here from a certain tree that's high in sulfur is made into the powder. And this little thing here is a charge already prepared, so that when he's out there, he's got his measure of powder already ready to reload the gun. And then a lot of this hunting takes place at night. You'll see just a torch with some batteries here. He must wear it for a lot of hours, because he's even put some padding here to keep it on his head there, comfortable against his head. So yeah, they hunt at night, get close to the animals, and shoot them. I've got 1 or 2 guys that work for me that have used these because they were poachers. They're missing fingers. One guy's missing an eye because the muzzleloader actually blew up in his face. A lot of the money that comes from the hunting is plowed back into anti-poaching and community work here. What we're trying to do is get the community to understand the value of the wildlife, but not only the wildlife, also of the flora of the area. We've got a lot of problems with people cutting down trees, especially in this area for what's known as mapani worms. They cut down a lot of trees, big trees, for beehives that they take the honey from, and it's destroying a lot of the forest. So they cut the tree down here, a tree that takes maybe 100 years to grow, for a few pounds of honey. So they make a fire with lots of smoke to smoke out the bees, to get them drunk so they don't sting. And then they'll cut the comb out, but they'll destroy everything. They destroy the hive, the queen bee gets killed, so they're destroying a lot, the tree, the hive, everything. And you'll notice how many trees they actually cut down in the bush while we're driving around. I've started a project, so we buy an actual hive that's made out of wood and try and keep them closer to the villages, and they harvest the honey there like twice a year. We're trying to get them to understand that you don't cut down trees like that. This, as I said, it's a tree that takes 100 years to grow. And also we've got a lot of burning every year, which is not really that good for the place. So what we're trying to do is, working with the community through the hunting, we're trying to introduce some options to them so that they don't continue this destructive method of utilizing these areas. We've also given some scholarships, so there's some of the schools that are within the area, some of their better students are getting a chance to go to a university in the bigger towns like Lusaka and Ndola to get a better education, so that they come back here and explain to their own people that there is a benefit for looking after the wildlife in the area. The wildlife that we actually hunt, the clients pay a trophy fee for. That money actually goes directly to the community here for any of the projects that they have, like boreholes, clinics, schools and things like that. We're policing on the ground here with motorbikes. We've got 8 motorbikes, and they basically patrol the area. They're not armed guards. These are guys that some of them from the community, some of them from outside. They will patrol the areas, pull out a lot of snares, and just maintain a presence. The main method of poaching that we have in Lunga is whip snares. So they'll actually take a pole and bend it. They'll attach the snare to the end of that pole. It comes down onto the ground and it's laid over a small hole that's covered up, which the snare is around. And in that small hole there'll be a trigger mechanism. You see the little stick is on this side, the trigger stick here. So the animal steps on that and then this trigger releases. So whatever animal stands on that, it'll trigger the snare. The snare will slip up the leg of the animal and the pole will whip back to make sure the snare is set properly. They've picked up already this year like 150 snares in 3 months. We've retrieved 3 muzzle loaders and a rifle also. Because we patrol during the day, those people are coming in at night with headlamps and they will hunt during the night, shoot at any eyes that they see. So it's very indiscriminate. They might even shoot a lion or a leopard or, they shoot the animal. They recover some of the animals and they will pack those out to the village before even day breaks. So that's like a hit and run. We have some sort of conventional snaring, which is just that they will put a snare standing up on a pathway with a log attached to it. So the animal will be walking along the path and will walk into that snare around its neck and it'll tighten, and then they will drag this log around until the poacher actually comes and tracks this animal and then, puts it out of its misery either with a spear or they actually hack them to death with an axe, which is quite brutal. There's a lot of poaching also closer to the villages with the dogs. 2 or 3 people with spears mainly, and they will go out with a pack of dogs, 5 to 10 to 12 dogs like that, and they'll run stuff down. I mean, this area here is especially bad for the baboons. What they'll do is they'll find a troop of baboons and they'll get the dogs to chase them, and they eventually tree the baboons. And if they can't get the baboons down from the tree, they'll chop the big tree down and then spear the baboons when they, fall to the ground. So they do use dogs for baboons. They catch a lot of reedbuck. They catch a lot of warthogs. You see a lot of the dogs in the villages there a bit torn up from warthog and bush pig that will defend themselves. But we do notice quite often when they've been through the dogs, how skittish the animals are. It's a bit like the wild dog packs when they come through. It does affect the game. It makes it very, very skittish. And those guys are just on like a day hunt. They'll come in during the day, hunt a little bit. Once they've got something, they'll disappear back to the villages. But it is a big problem here, hunting with the dogs, and they follow up with the spears. The biggest problem with the poaching is that it's either commercial meat poaching or it's subsistence poaching. But even the subsistence poaching, with the amount of people that live around these hunting areas, is no longer sustainable. These areas can only sustain very little offtake. As the season gets drier and water holes get less, the poachers actually use the sacking from the nylon bags that they get here. They weave it into a twine and then they surround the water hole with snares. So the doves and the francolin and the guinea fowl, when they walk down to the water, actually walk into these snares and get caught. One of the major problems that we do have on these rivers here is also unsustainable fishing. The people come in here and they fish with wrong methods, very small nets. In the swamps that we've got in our western boundary, they're actually using mosquito nets, and those swamps are breeding grounds for the fish. So they're catching the breeding fish, they're catching all the small fry that is our future fish, and it's just getting cleaned up. They're cleaning it all out, and it needs to be controlled. We do have a breeding season that is supposed to be closed to fishing, but it's during the rainy season when there's no presence here. So that does a lot of damage to the rivers and to the swamp, where most of our fish for the Kafue ecosystem is actually bred. During the rainy season, access is very limited here. The poachers have a big advantage because the rivers are full. They use the rivers with canoes, posing as fishermen. They set a lot of snares all along the river, and they catch a lot of small stuff like bushbuck, puku, and impala. And then also the access to the main area. These guys on foot, they can move around how they want to, and they spend weeks at a time in certain areas hunting and drying the meat, and once the meat is dry and they've got enough meat, they carry the meat out. We were operating in another area, which is the next door area, which was Lunga-Busanga, and luckily there, our partner in that area is very dedicated to wildlife. He's a hunter as well, but not a professional hunter. And he actually put a helicopter based in the area to do anti-poaching, which was very, very effective. And that brought the area back in 7 years. It brought it back to what it would have been 20 years ago. I mean, the game numbers have increased incredibly. The poaching has gone down a lot. I would say 70 to 80% of the poaching was cut out. So we're going to be looking to try and do what we did in Kasonso, is try and get some sponsorship to be able to get some fuel for the helicopter, and that would be a big advantage. You know, the helicopter is a fantastic tool. Even during the rainy season, you can patrol really well. You have good visual, and early in the morning and late in the evenings you can see their fires where they're drying the meat. So you're taken straight to the point where they're collecting all their meat and drying it. These GMAs, like the one we're hunting here, is being maintained wild because of the tsetse fly. The tsetse fly here for domestic animals carries a sleeping sickness. If you bring a domestic animal here within like 2 weeks, those animals will fall sick with sleeping sickness and eventually die, which has been a big salvation for a lot of Africa, and us included here. I'm seeing a little bit of cattle encroachment that we've got, and they're managing to encroach because they inoculate their cows against the sleeping sickness. And those cows there, they won't live as long because the inoculation is quite toxic, but all they need is to get them up to a certain age and weight, and then they sell those cattle. So it's still a problem. It's not something that we should turn a blind eye to. It is a problem, and we need to try and control the encroachment of cattle, goats into these areas here, because they will take over the natural grazing that belongs really to the wildlife that we have here. Even though the populations of elephant have gone down a lot, there is still a few incidents of ivory poaching. There's a slight problem with also poaching for lion and leopard, because firstly the skins, and then some of them are actually poached for the bones and the fat. And the lions and leopards, they're quite easy to snare on a bait. So we're watching out for this, and I think all of us, even African parks doing their patrols and everything, they're watching out for these problems here. So our forests here held a lot of rosewood, which is a very expensive wood. We've got a lot of pod mahogany and also mukwa. All these timbers here are being cut down in the forest there by illegal timber people. It's a huge problem because there's thousands, if not millions of dollars being lost by the community. If they could manage that properly, it would be a resource that will bring them a lot of money. The anti-poaching that we're doing now is basically derived from the hunting activities that we do here. A certain percentage of our profits go into the anti-poaching, like buying the motorbikes, supplying fuel, paying the guys who ride the motorbikes, and our own personal scouts who actually collect the wires and intelligence and sometimes catch the poachers with their muzzle loaders. It's quite effective, but it's still not enough. The hunting doesn't generate the money that we need to do the anti-poaching and also to do the community work that we need to. At the moment, it's costing us like $4,000 a month just for the motorbikes and the fuel and paying some salaries. And it's effective. We've noticed over the last 5 years that we've been here that there has been a change. I mean, it's not a sudden change, it's a gradual change, and that's not a lot of money for the change that we're seeing. But if we could beef that up with some other support, however small it is, it would help a lot. There's a lot of encroachment by villagers because of their methods of farming, and the game control areas are not really controlled that well. I think we've lost along the way, we've lost what the management of these areas is supposed to be. Really, if we're going to look after the fauna and flora of our country, these things need to be controlled and looked at very carefully, because these ecosystems are very delicate, and once we lose them, it's very, very difficult to get them back to what they are. So yeah, the management of the areas, they're not being managed properly, because these management plans were drawn up a long time ago, and they're not being adhered to anymore. It's just sort of like haphazard. We go along as we go along, and things don't happen as they should. From my point of view, the main problem is the political influence has overshadowed the policing and the management of these areas here.